This week we got price increases, a Sony and Xbox catfight, a handheld teardown, and more. So let's just go ahead, together, as a people, and check it out! And welcome to another sensational Sunday. I'm Mike, and I'm back to talk about the gaming news. But no matter where you game, a lot of countries outside of the US have been seeing price increases. So Sony increased the price of the PS5 last year, and even developers have raised the prices of some of their existing games. While Microsoft has now followed suit and have increased the prices of the Xbox and Game Pass in several countries. So starting August 1st, the Xbox Series X in Canada, UK, most European countries, and Australia will see a price increase. The US, Japan, Chile, Brazil, and Colombia are not affected for now, and the price of the Series S is not increasing, it's just the Series X. Now, the increase will basically be in line with the increase that Sony did last year with the PS5, and it also makes sense for them not to increase the Series S with them releasing the 1TB model on September 1st, which is going to be $349. I think they want to keep those models lower price as a way to get people into the Xbox ecosystem. Now, when it comes to Game Pass, it seems like the price is increasing by $1 or $2 depending on the area. In the US, regular Game Pass is going from $10 to $11, and Ultimate is going from $15 to $17. Now, this is going to start July 6th for new members and August 13th for existing members, except for in Germany, which apparently is going to be September 13th for some reason. So the increases for Game Pass seem similar in most countries except for Norway, Chile, Denmark, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia, where there will not be an increase. So basically, both Microsoft and Sony were like, whoopsie, we didn't charge enough for these systems, and now we got to increase prices to try to make up for it. I'm personally wondering if these price increases will eventually come to the US, or if they're not raising prices to avoid backlash. It's possible that they may wait until they release an upgraded model like they did with the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X last generation, and then price those even higher. To be honest, the PS5 and the Series X are pretty expensive, so I'm really hoping that we'll continue to see a trend of price increases. Now, we ain't done with the Xbox yet, because last week I mentioned that Microsoft was doing their pretrial on June 22nd and 23rd with the FTC for the whole Activision deal. Well, we got a few things that I found interesting from this pretrial, so let's hop into it. So, Sarah Bond of Xbox took the stand to speak on the state of cloud gaming under Microsoft. Now, this is interesting because we really don't get much information on the state of cloud gaming from any of the companies that actually host cloud gaming services. Now, this is obviously going to be a point of contention for Microsoft buying Activision because it's the main reason that it's currently blocked in the UK. They're afraid that it'll make Microsoft too powerful in this newly emerging cloud gaming market. So Microsoft's position is to show them that purchasing Activision isn't a threat. And the reason I'm saying all of this is because I'm giving context as to why it's going to sound a little bit negative when they talk about cloud gaming in the testimony. So Sarah Bond took the stand for Microsoft and basically said that cloud gaming under Microsoft really isn't used in a standalone way. Based on their data, most people just use it as a console feature to play games while they're waiting for that game to finish downloading in the background. And when she was asked if they saw cloud gaming as a separate market, she said that it's more of a console feature and even stated that in some scenarios it's not the ideal way to play games. She's also quoted in this article as saying the games that are being streamed are built for console, but they're being streamed to a different device, so it's not always the best player experience. This is particularly interesting because Sony CEO recently said similar things about cloud gaming basically not being all the way there yet. I think once the tech gets better and they can find a way to reduce latency, it could be a viable way to play games in the future, but using it to play games while you're waiting for that game to download and then playing a better version of that game makes sense for the way the technology is right now. But aside from cloud gaming, the other part of this deal that was being protested, especially by Sony, was Microsoft owning Call of Duty and possibly making it an Xbox and PC exclusive. While Microsoft went ahead and signed 10-year deals with several companies, including Nintendo, to bring Call of Duty to those platforms as a way to combat this. Well, another thing has come to light as a result of this trial. So Microsoft presented as evidence an email between the chief of PlayStation, Jim Ryan, and one of the former CEOs about the chances of Microsoft making Call of Duty an exclusive. So this is a quote from that email. "It's not an exclusivity play at all. They're thinking bigger and they have the cash to make moves like this. I spent a fair amount of time with Phil Spencer and Bobby Kotick, and I'm pretty sure that we will continue to see Call of Duty on PlayStation for years to come." Now, Jim Ryan also goes on to mention in the email that he hopes the deal doesn't happen, but he's not complacent and has some stuff in the works. We've already started to see that with their investment in multiplayer games. They have Marathon coming soon from Bungie, as well as another PlayStation exclusive multiplayer game that's in development from a studio they recently purchased. For me, this email isn't super surprising because it wouldn't make sense for Microsoft to make Call of Duty an exclusive, considering how popular it is on all the platforms that it's currently on. It's kind of like when they purchased Mojang and they got control of Minecraft. But Sony just wanted to make it seem that way to try to block the deal, and that was an easy argument to make the regulators because it's not that difficult to understand the premise of if Microsoft gets this big game and takes it away from Sony, it could hurt them. That strategy didn't really work anyway because most of the regulators saw how dominant Sony already is in the console market and how much it would devalue Call of Duty and the Activision purchase in general if they did make it a console exclusive. But apparently Sony weren't the only ones that had exclusivity concerns. Microsoft had concerns about Sony's deal with ZeniMax, the parent company of Bethesda. So Phil Spencer took the stand during the pre-trial and talked about why they bought Bethesda, and he mentioned Sony paying to keep games like Ghostwire Tokyo and Deathloop PlayStation exclusives. He also mentioned that they were in early talks to make Starfield a PlayStation exclusive before they purchased them. Essentially, he said the reason they had to purchase ZeniMax was so that they could stay competitive with their game offerings, with them already being in third place as a console maker and Sony making all these exclusive deals. Now, obviously, this is Microsoft trying to frame their Bethesda purchase and the fact that they made their games exclusives now as a move they had to make to stay competitive with Sony. Obviously, Sony would be able to point to that as an example and say, hey, they bought this company and they took those games off of our platform, which would make them look bad in the trial, so they're trying to get ahead of that. Now, we know that Ghostwire and Deathloop were timed exclusives for PlayStation for 1 year because they didn't appear on Xbox or Game Pass until that deal ended. So some of the points are valid, but realistically, even if they had made Starfield a timed exclusive, the Xbox would have been fine without them buying Bethesda. So again, this is just framing on Microsoft's side to try to justify their purchase of Bethesda as a competitive move that they had to do. So we got some really interesting tidbits of information so far just from the pre-trial, so we'll have to see how this thing turns out as a trial and the cattiness between Sony and Microsoft continues. For now though, this shall conclude the Microsoft Activision Hour. But speaking of acquisitions, you know what I would like to acquire? A ticket to E3 2024. Well, that may not be happening as rumors have started that E3 2024 and 2025 may be canceled. If you haven't followed E3, it was basically the biggest game showcase for the media that usually took place around summer every year. In the past, we've got big announcements like new games and consoles. It was basically the show for console manufacturers and publishers to make big announcements to the press. But we haven't seen an E3 since the pandemic started. It was supposed to come back this year, but they ran into some issues putting the show together and it was canceled. Now, this event usually takes place in LA, which is important because this is where this rumor comes from. So the Los Angeles City Tourism Board listed convention cancellations for E3 2024 and 2025 this week. The ESA, the company behind E3, commented and said that they're basically still in discussion for E3 2024 and beyond, and no final decisions have been made yet. But considering the cancellation this year and the listing for the future cancellations, it doesn't look good for the show returning. I've listened to podcasts and watched other creators who actually went to Summer Games Fest this year, and they seem to enjoy it almost as much as E3, so if this show continues to grow, it'll probably end up taking the place of E3. Either way, the future of E3 is looking pretty bleak right now. But you know what's not looking so bleak? The inside of the ROG Ally, and that's what we're talking about today. In our final story. So the ROG Ally is still a fairly new handheld, and ASUS didn't give much information about the internals leading up to the release like Valve did with the Steam Deck. Valve did their own teardown prior to release to show the insides of the deck and the repairability, but ASUS kept things pretty much under wrap. I have an Ally and I did an unboxing video, so check that out if you haven't seen it. Now personally, I didn't have the nerve to open up my new handheld on day one and look inside of it, but luckily iFixit did, so now we have an idea of how repairable this device could be in the future. So I watched iFixit's full teardown, and surprisingly, this is an easy device to open and replace parts in, even easier than the Steam Deck. The only thing noted as being more difficult was the screen because of how much adhesive they use, but one of the most important components, the battery, is way easier to replace than on the Steam Deck. So the good news is it seems very repairable as far as taking it apart, but ASUS hasn't committed to making parts available for consumers to do their own repairs. Valve actually partnered with iFixit to make official parts available to buy for the Steam Deck, but ASUS hasn't really committed to anything. So if repairability is a concern, the components are easy to swap out, but it might not be easy to find the components. So as of right now, the Steam Deck still wins as far as repairability, just based on the availability of parts. And my availability is coming to an end because I'm bringing this video to a close, but let me know how you feel about the Xbox and Game Pass price increases down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification to be notified when I drop a video or a live stream. And always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.